You think you know our planet. You've seen the maps. You've watched the documentaries. You've scrolled through satellite images that show every street corner, every mountain peak, every frozen wasteland at the poles. We live in an age where privacy seems impossible, where satellites can read license plates from orbit, where every inch of land has been surveyed, cataloged, and made available at the click of a button. But there's something they haven't told you. Right now, beneath the surface of our oceans, there exists a world larger than all the continents combined, a world where sunlight has never penetrated, where the pressure would crush a nuclear submarine like a beer can, where creatures exist that seem to belong to science fiction rather than biology textbooks, a world that we have explored less than the surface of Mars. The ocean covers 71% of our planet. It contains 97% of all water on Earth. It drives our weather systems, produces more than half of the world's oxygen, and provides food for billions of people. By every measure, it is the most important environment on our planet, and we've seen less than 5% of it. This isn't speculation. This is the official number given by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Less than 5% of the ocean floor has been mapped with modern high-resolution technology. Less than 20% has been mapped at all, even with low-resolution methods. The rest remains as unknown to us as the dark side of the moon was to our grandparents. But here's where things get strange. We've had the technology to explore the deep ocean for over 60 years. In January 1960, two men named Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh climbed into a submersible called the Trieste and descended to the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the deepest known point in the world's oceans. They reached a depth of 35,797 feet, nearly 7 miles below the surface. They stayed at the bottom for 20 minutes, observed a flatfish swimming past their window, and returned safely to the surface. That was 1960, before the moon landing, before the internet, before smartphones, before most of the technology we take for granted today even existed. So if we could reach the deepest point on Earth with 1960s technology, why haven't we explored more of the ocean in the 64 years since? The standard explanation is funding. Space exploration is sexy. It captures the public imagination. It makes for good television. Ocean exploration, by comparison, is dark, cold, and difficult to film. NASA receives approximately $25 billion per year. NOAA receives around $6 billion, and only a fraction of that goes to ocean exploration. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. Consider this. In 2019, Victor Vescovo, a private citizen with deep pockets and a sense of adventure, built a submersible called the Limiting Factor and personally dove to the bottom of all 5 of the world's oceans. He reached the bottom of the Challenger Deep, deeper than Piccard and Walsh went in 1960. He did this with private funding, using technology that could be manufactured by private industry. If one wealthy individual can explore the deepest points on Earth with his own money, why can't the combined resources of the world's governments do the same on a larger scale? The technology exists, the capability exists, the scientific interest certainly exists. So what's stopping us? Some researchers have begun asking uncomfortable questions. Dr. Robert Ballard, the oceanographer who discovered the wreck of the Titanic in 1985, has been vocal about the disparity between space and ocean funding. In interviews, he's pointed out that we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own ocean floor. He's questioned why the priorities of the scientific establishment seem so misaligned with the realities of our planet. But Dr. Ballard's critiques, while valid, only scratch the surface. Because when you dig deeper into the history of ocean exploration, you start finding patterns that are difficult to explain. Let's talk about the United States Navy. The Navy has been operating deep submergence vehicles for decades, most of which the public knows nothing about. The NR-1, a nuclear-powered research submarine launched in 1969, was capable of operating at depths of over 2,300 feet and staying submerged for up to 30 days. It was used for classified missions throughout the Cold War, including recovery operations that remain secret to this day. The NR-1 was decommissioned in 2008, and the Navy has never publicly acknowledged what replaced it, but we know something replaced it. The Navy doesn't simply abandon capabilities. Military technology advances in secret, often decades ahead of what the civilian world sees. The stealth bomber existed for years before the public knew about it. The same is true for countless other military technologies. What deep-sea capabilities does the Navy have now? What have they seen down there? What have they found? In December 2017, the New York Times broke a story that shocked the world. The Pentagon had been running a secret program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, investigating reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, what most people call UFOs. The program had been funded with $22 million in black budget money. hidden from public oversight. But here's the part that received less attention. Many of the encounters investigated by this program didn't happen in the air. They happened at sea. Commander David Fravor, a Navy pilot who witnessed the famous Tic Tac UFO in 2004, has described what he saw in detail. The object was hovering over a disturbance in the water, what appeared to be a large object just beneath the surface. When his aircraft approached, the object disappeared, moving at speeds that defied explanation. But what was beneath the water? What was causing that disturbance on the surface? Fravor has said in interviews that something was down there, something large, something that the unidentified object seemed to be interacting with. The Navy has acknowledged these encounters are real. In 2020, the Pentagon officially released videos of unidentified aerial phenomena captured by Navy pilots. What they haven't explained is the connection to the ocean. Why do so many of these sightings happen over water? What's down there that these objects seem so interested in? These questions lead us to some of the most mysterious sounds ever recorded. In 1997, NOAA's underwater listening system, originally designed to detect Soviet submarines during the Cold War, picked up something unprecedented. They called it the Bloop. It was an ultra-low frequency sound, one of the loudest ever recorded in the ocean, detected by sensors more than 3,000 miles apart. The sound had characteristics consistent with a biological source, but to produce such a sound, the animal would need to be significantly larger than a blue whale, the largest creature known to exist. NOAA's official position today is that the bloop was caused by an ice quake, the sound of a large iceberg cracking and scraping along the ocean floor in Antarctica. This explanation was put forward in 2012, 15 years after the sound was first recorded. For 15 years, the bloop remained officially unexplained, but not everyone accepts the ice quake theory. Dr. Christopher Fox, the NOAA scientist who first analyzed the bloop, initially stated that the sound had a biological profile. Other acoustic researchers have pointed out that the bloop's characteristics don't perfectly match known icequake signatures. The debate continues in academic circles, far from public attention. The bloop isn't alone. NOAA has recorded numerous unexplained sounds in the deep ocean over the years. There's the slow down, detected in 1997, a sound that gradually decreased in frequency over 7 minutes. There's the upsweep, first detected in 1991 and still being recorded today, a sound that rises in frequency and seems to be seasonal, suggesting a biological origin, though no known animal has been identified as the source. There's Julia, recorded in 1999, which sounds eerily like a human voice or a whale song, but doesn't match any known species. Officially, all of these sounds have been explained as ice, seismic activity, or known marine animals. Unofficially, researchers continue to debate their origins. The ocean is so vast, so unexplored, that the idea of unknown creatures producing these sounds cannot be dismissed. And then, there's what we've actually found down there. In June 2011, a Swedish diving team called Ocean X was searching for shipwrecks in the Baltic Sea when their sonar picked up something unusual on the seabed. At a depth of approximately 300 feet, they found a circular object roughly 200 feet in diameter, resting on what appeared to be a pillar or raised platform. The object had strange features that the team described as resembling a staircase or ramp leading up to it, and straight lines that didn't look natural. The discovery was dubbed the Baltic Sea Anomaly and made headlines around the world. Theories range from a crashed UFO to a secret Nazi weapon to a natural geological formation. When the Ocean X team returned to dive on the object, they reported equipment malfunctions. Cameras stopped working. Satellite phones failed when they were directly over the site. Scientists were skeptical. Geologists suggested the object could be a glacial deposit, a chunk of rock dragged along the seabed by retreating ice thousands of years ago. This would explain its unusual shape. But it wouldn't explain the equipment failures, which the team insists were real and repeated. The Baltic Sea anomaly remains unexplained to this day. No major scientific institution has conducted a thorough investigation. No government has expressed interest in studying it. A mysterious circular object sits on the floor of a busy shipping lane in northern Europe, and the scientific establishment has collectively shrugged and moved on. Why? This brings us to a pattern that appears again and again when you study ocean exploration. Discoveries are made, headlines are generated, and then silence. No follow-up, no investigation, no answers. Consider the case of the Yonaguni monument off the coast of Japan. In 1987, a diver named Kihachiro Aratake discovered what appeared to be a massive stone structure on the seabed near Yonaguni Island. The structure features flat parallel surfaces, right angles, sharp edges, and what look like carved steps. It extends for hundreds of feet and rises nearly 90 feet from the ocean floor. Is it man-made? Some geologists say no, arguing that the formation can be explained by natural fracturing of sandstone along predictable geometric patterns, but other researchers, including Dr. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus, who has studied the site for decades, believe the structure shows clear signs of human modification. He's identified what he believes are carvings, drainage channels, and architectural features that cannot be explained by natural processes. The debate continues, but funding for comprehensive research has never materialized. A potentially history-changing discovery sits in relatively shallow water, accessible to divers, and we still don't have a definitive answer about what it is. The same pattern emerges with underwater structures off the coasts of Cuba, India, and the Mediterranean. Sonar surveys reveal geometric shapes on the seabed. Initial reports generate excitement, and then nothing. No major expeditions, no definitive studies, no answers. In 2001, a Canadian company called Advanced Digital Communications was mapping the ocean floor off the western tip of Cuba when they discovered something remarkable. At a depth of over 2,000 feet, their sonar revealed what appeared to be geometric structures covering an area of nearly 8 square miles. The shapes included what looked like pyramids, rectangular buildings, and roads arranged in an organized pattern. Paulina Zalitsky, the lead researcher, described the images as showing what appeared to be symbols and inscriptions carved into the stones. She estimated that if these were man-made structures, they would have been above water during the last ice age, more than 10,000 years ago, predating any known civilization capable of building such monuments. The discovery was reported by Reuters, BBC, and National Geographic. Zalitsky planned return expeditions to get better images and take samples, and then the story disappeared. Funding dried up, media interest evaporated. The Cuban government, which controls access to these waters, stopped issuing permits for the research. More than 20 years later, we still don't know what's on the ocean floor off the coast of Cuba. One of the most potentially significant archaeological discoveries in history sits unexplored, uninvestigated, and largely forgotten. Are these structures natural formations, ancient ruins, something else entirely? We don't know because no one will pay to find out. Or perhaps someone already knows and has decided the rest of us shouldn't. Let's talk about the international law that governs the ocean. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, known as UNCLOS, is one of the most comprehensive international treaties ever created. Adopted in 1982, it establishes rules for everything from fishing rights to territorial waters to the exploitation of seabed resources. Most of the world's nations have ratified it, though notably, the United States has not. UNCLOS divides the ocean into zones. Territorial waters extend 12 nautical miles from a nation's coast, where that nation has complete sovereignty. The exclusive economic zone extends 200 nautical miles, where nations have rights to resources but must allow passage to other ships. Beyond that lies the high seas, international waters that belong to no one. But here's where it gets interesting. UNCLOS also established something called the International Seabed Authority, based in Kingston, Jamaica. The ISA has jurisdiction over the ocean floor beyond national boundaries, what the treaty calls the area. Any exploration or exploitation of resources in the area requires approval from the ISA. On paper, this makes sense. The resources of the deep seabed should benefit all of humanity, not just the nations wealthy enough to extract them, but in practice, the ISA operates with minimal oversight and maximum secrecy. The ISA has issued exploration licenses to various nations and corporations for mining operations in the deep sea. These licenses cover areas rich in polymetallic nodules, potato-sized rocks containing valuable minerals like manganese, nickel, copper, and cobalt. The estimated value of these resources is in the trillions of dollars, but actual mining hasn't begun. Despite decades of exploration licenses, despite billions invested in technology, despite clear economic incentives, large-scale deep-sea mining remains perpetually on the horizon. Companies announce plans, secure funding, develop technology, and then quietly abandon their projects. The pattern is so consistent that it defies economic logic. Why would corporations walk away from trillion-dollar opportunities? What are they finding down there that makes them change their minds? In recent years, some deep-sea mining advocates have become vocal about what they see as deliberate obstruction. They claim that environmental regulations are being weaponized to prevent extraction, that permitting processes are designed to fail, that there's a coordinated effort to keep humanity away from the deep seabed. Environmentalists counter that deep-sea mining would devastate fragile ecosystems that we barely understand. They point out that many deep-sea species are still being discovered, that disrupting the seabed could have consequences we can't predict. Both sides have valid points, but neither side can explain why the world's governments, which rarely agree on anything, seem to be in tacit agreement that the deep ocean should remain untouched. The same nations that fight over fishing rights and territorial waters, that cannot agree on climate change or trade policy, somehow manage to agree that large-scale deep-sea exploration should not proceed. This brings us to the military dimension. The ocean is militarily significant in ways that most civilians don't appreciate. Submarines armed with nuclear missiles patrol the depths, serving as the most survivable leg of the nuclear triad. The locations of these submarines are among the most closely guarded secrets of the nations that operate them. Underwater cables carry 97% of intercontinental data traffic, making them critical infrastructure for the global economy. Vast networks of underwater sensors monitor for submarines, earthquakes, and other phenomena. The deep ocean is not empty. It is watched, monitored, and patrolled by the world's most powerful militaries. They have technologies we don't know about. They've seen things they don't discuss. They have reasons for keeping the public's attention directed elsewhere. In 2021, the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia announced a new security partnership called AUKUS. The centerpiece of the agreement was Australia's acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines. The official justification was countering China's growing naval power in the Pacific. But some analysts noticed something curious about the AUKUS announcement. The submarines Australia will receive are among the most advanced in the world, capable of operating at depths and durations that far exceed conventional submarines. These aren't just military assets. They're deep-sea exploration platforms. Why does Australia need submarines that can operate in the deepest parts of the ocean? What does it expect to find down there? What does it already know? The answers to these questions are classified, but the pattern is clear. The world's major powers are investing billions in deep-sea capabilities, while telling the public that ocean exploration is underfunded and unimportant. Someone is lying. As we come to the end of this chapter, let's take stock of what we've established. The ocean remains largely unexplored, and the reasons given for this don't hold up to scrutiny. We've had the technology to explore the deep sea for over 60 years. Private individuals can now build submersibles capable of reaching the deepest points on Earth. The scientific interest is there, the economic incentives are there, yet the exploration doesn't happen. Strange sounds emanate from the depths that official science cannot fully explain. Unusual structures sit on the seabed that no one will investigate. Discoveries are made and then forgotten. Researchers ask questions and then fall silent. The world's militaries have capabilities in the deep ocean that they don't discuss. International laws exist that restrict access to the seabed. Major powers that agree on almost nothing seem to agree that the deep ocean should remain mysterious. This is not proof of a conspiracy, but it is evidence of a pattern of avoidance, a pattern of secrecy, a pattern of questions that are never answered. In the next chapter, we will go deeper. We will examine the specific objects and structures that have been found on the ocean floor, the ones that made it into the historical record before attention could be redirected. We will look at ancient maps that seem to show coastlines that were underwater long before human civilization supposedly existed. We will consider the possibility that the history we've been taught is incomplete, that there are chapters missing from the story of our planet. The abyss holds secrets, and we are just beginning to ask the right questions. In 1968, a pilot named Robert Brusch was flying a routine survey mission over the shallow waters of the Bahamas when he noticed something strange below. Through the crystal clear Caribbean water, he could see what appeared to be a massive rectangular structure on the seabed. The shape was too regular, too geometric to be natural. It looked like the foundation of an enormous building, stretching for hundreds of feet across the sandy bottom. Brusch reported his sighting, and the following year, an expedition was organized to investigate. What they found has been debated for over 50 years. The structure, located near North Bimini Island, consists of a half-mile-long arrangement of limestone blocks. The blocks are massive, some measuring up to 15 feet in length. They appear to be arranged in a deliberate pattern, forming what looks like a road or foundation. The formation is remarkably flat on top, with stones fitted together in a way that seems intentional. It became known as the Bimini Road, and it sparked immediate controversy. Geologists examined the site and declared it natural. The formation, they said, was beach rock, a type of sedimentary stone that forms when sand and shell fragments cement together in the intertidal zone. Beach rock naturally fractures into rectangular blocks due to the way it forms and erodes. The Bimini Road was nothing more than an unusual but entirely natural geological feature. Case closed. Move on. Nothing to see here, but not everyone was convinced. Dr. Greg Little, an archaeologist who has studied the Bimini Formation extensively, points out several anomalies that the natural explanation doesn't address. Core samples taken from the stones show multiple layers of microorganisms, suggesting the blocks were exposed to air at different times, as if they had been moved or stacked. Some blocks appear to have prop stones underneath them, smaller stones placed deliberately to level the larger ones. The formation sits at a depth that would have been dry land during the last ice age, when sea levels were significantly lower than today. In 2006 and 2007, Little led expeditions that discovered additional stone formations near the original Bimini Road. These included a second linear arrangement of stones running parallel to the first, and what appeared to be rectangular foundations scattered across the nearby seabed. He documented stones with tongue and groove edges, a construction technique that would be unusual for natural beach rock but common in human-made structures. Little doesn't claim to have definitive proof that the Bimini Road is man-made, but he argues that dismissing it as natural beach rock is premature. The site deserves more study, more investigation, more scientific attention. It hasn't received any of these things. Despite being easily accessible in shallow water, despite the ongoing controversy, despite the potential historical significance, the Bimini Road remains largely unstudied by mainstream archaeology. Major universities don't fund expeditions there. Peer-reviewed journals rarely publish new research on the site. The formation sits in crystal clear water, visited by tourists and recreational divers, yet the scientific establishment treats it as a closed case. This is the pattern we identified in Chapter 1. Discovery, dismissal, silence. But the Bimini Road is just the beginning. Across the world's oceans, similar structures have been found. Formations that appear too geometric to be natural, arrangements of stone that suggest human intervention, structures at depths that would have been above water only during prehistoric times. Let's travel to the other side of the world, to the waters off the coast of Yonaguni, a small Japanese island in the East China Sea. In 1987, a local diving instructor named Kihachiro Aratake was searching for new sites to take tourists when he encountered something that would change his life. Rising from the seabed at a depth of about 75 feet was what appeared to be a massive step pyramid. The structure featured flat terraces, sharp right angles, and what looked like carved stairways. It stretched for nearly 500 feet and rose about 90 feet from the ocean floor. Aratake had discovered what would become known as the Yonaguni Monument, one of the most controversial underwater structures on Earth. The debate over Yonaguni has raged for nearly 4 decades. On one side are geologists who argue that the monument is entirely natural. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University who dove on the structure in 1997, concluded that it was primarily natural, formed by the fracturing of sandstone along predictable geometric planes. Sandstone, he pointed out, naturally breaks along perpendicular joints, creating shapes that can appear artificial to the untrained eye. The steps and terraces are simply the result of erosion along these natural fracture lines. On the other side is Dr. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus, who has been studying Yonaguni since 1992. Kimura has logged more than 100 dives on the structure and has documented features that he believes cannot be explained by natural processes alone. Kimura points to what he identifies as carved channels that would have functioned as drainage systems. He has documented what appear to be tool marks on some stone surfaces. He has identified a feature he calls the turtle, a carved rock that resembles the animal sacred in Okinawan culture. He has found what look like post holes that could have supported wooden structures. Most significantly, he has documented 2 round holes on a triangular stone that he believes are too precise to be natural, possibly designed to hold pillars. Kimura acknowledges that the base structure may be natural rock, but argues that it was significantly modified by human hands. He estimates that the modifications were made between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago, when the site would have been above water. If Kimura is even partially right, the implications are significant. The Yonaguni monument sits at a depth that would have been above water before approximately 8,000 BCE. If humans modified this structure, it would predate the Egyptian pyramids by at least 5,000 years. It would predate Stonehenge by thousands of years. It would suggest that sophisticated stoneworking existed in East Asia far earlier than mainstream archaeology acknowledges. But here's what makes the Yonaguni debate particularly frustrating. Despite nearly 4 decades of controversy, no major international scientific institution has organized a comprehensive study of the site. Kimura has done his research largely independently, with limited funding and equipment. Schock visited once in 1997 and formed his conclusions. The Japanese government has not designated the site as a protected archaeological area, which would trigger mandatory research. The structure sits in relatively shallow water, accessible to recreational divers. Thousands of tourists visit it every year, and yet the scientific question remains unresolved, not because it can't be answered, but because no one with resources is seriously trying to answer it. Let's go deeper. In the waters off the coast of India, submerged beneath the Gulf of Khambhat, lies what may be the remains of an ancient settlement. In 2001, oceanographers from India's National Institute of Ocean Technology were conducting routine surveys when their side-scan sonar detected something unexpected. At depths ranging from 70 to 130 feet, they found geometric patterns on the seabed. The shapes appeared to form a roughly rectangular grid, extending across an area of several square miles. India's Science and Technology Minister Murli Manohar Joshi announced the discovery to the world. Initial reports suggested this could be evidence of a settlement that existed before the area was submerged by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. The NIOT team conducted dredging operations to retrieve samples from the site. They recovered artifacts including what appeared to be pottery fragments, stone tools, fossilized animal bones, and pieces of wood. When the wood fragments were carbon dated, they returned ages of approximately 9,500 years, placing them in the early Holocene period. The discovery made headlines globally. If confirmed, this would be evidence of human activity in the region thousands of years earlier than previously documented, predating the known Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley by millennia. Then came the criticism. Skeptics pointed out significant methodological problems with the investigation. Dredging is a crude technique that can mix materials from different depths and time periods. The artifacts retrieved could have been washed into the area from elsewhere. The pottery fragments might be natural geofacts, misidentified as human-made objects. The carbon dating, while accurate for the wood samples, didn't prove that the wood was associated with human activity or with the geometric patterns on the seabed. These criticisms were valid. The initial investigation had been hasty, driven more by political excitement than scientific rigor. More careful research was clearly needed, but here's the problem, that more careful research never happened. Despite the global attention, despite the potential historical significance, despite the legitimate scientific questions raised, no comprehensive follow-up study has been conducted. The Indian government, which initially trumpeted the discovery, quietly moved on to other priorities. International researchers who expressed interest found that permits to work in the area were difficult to obtain. The site remains largely unexamined by modern archaeological methods. More than 2 decades later, we still don't know what's on the floor of the Gulf of Khambhat. The skeptics may be completely right. The geometric patterns may be natural formations, and the artifacts may be misidentified or displaced. But we don't know, because no one has done the work to find out. Why would India, a nation with a strong interest in ancient history and cultural heritage, allow such a potentially significant site to go unstudied? Why would the scientific community, which should be eager to resolve such controversies, simply walk away? The pattern repeats. In December 2001, the same year as the Gulf of Khambhat announcement, a team from a Canadian company called Advanced Digital Communications was conducting sonar surveys of the ocean floor off the western coast of Cuba. They were looking for shipwrecks, hoping to find treasure from the Spanish colonial era. What they found was something far more puzzling. At a depth of approximately 2,000 to 2,500 feet, their equipment detected what appeared to be geometric structures, covering a large area of the seabed. Paulina Zalitsky, the Russian-born engineer leading the expedition, described the sonar images cautiously, but with evident excitement. The shapes appeared to show symmetric structures, some of which resembled pyramids. There were what looked like rectangular formations arranged in patterns. The overall impression was of an organized site, not random natural geology. Zalitsky's team used a remotely operated vehicle to get closer images of the seabed. The footage they retrieved seemed to show smooth, cut stone surfaces and what might have been carved symbols, though the images were not clear enough for definitive analysis. News of the discovery spread rapidly. Reuters, the BBC, and National Geographic all reported on the find. The Cuban government expressed interest. Zalitsky planned return expeditions with better equipment to get clearer images and retrieve physical samples, and then the project stalled. Funding became difficult to secure. Access to Cuban waters grew complicated as political tension shifted. Zalitsky's company faced business challenges unrelated to the underwater research. Years passed without a return expedition. In subsequent interviews, Zalitsky remained convinced that the structures warranted further investigation, but she also grew more cautious in her claims, acknowledging that, without better data, no definitive conclusions could be drawn. The scientific mainstream remained deeply skeptical. The depth of the site posed a fundamental problem. For those structures to have been above water, sea levels would have needed to be dramatically lower than at any point since humans evolved. Some researchers suggested the sonar images might be showing natural volcanic formations or unusual sediment patterns rather than artificial structures. These objections are reasonable. The Cuba site may indeed be nothing more than unusual geology, misinterpreted through imperfect sonar imaging, but we don't know, because in over 2 decades since the discovery, no one has conducted the definitive investigation that would settle the question. The sonar images exist. The coordinates are known. Modern remotely operated vehicles are far more capable than those available in 2001. The technology exists to get clear high-definition footage of whatever is on that seabed, yet no expedition has done so. Why? Let's examine another case, one that briefly captured scientific attention before fading into obscurity. In 2015, researchers from Tel Aviv University published a paper in the journal PLOS-1 describing an unusual underwater structure off the coast of Israel. At a depth of about 30 feet in the Mediterranean Sea, near the site of the ancient settlement of Atlit Yam, they had documented a semicircular stone structure weighing an estimated 50,000 tons. The structure, which they called the Atlit Yam stone heap, appeared to be man-made. It consisted of boulders arranged in a deliberate pattern, forming a shape that didn't match natural underwater formations in the area. The researchers estimated it was built approximately 9,000 years ago, when the site was on dry land near the ancient coastline. This discovery was significant because Atlit Yam is one of the oldest known submerged settlements in the world. The site contains the remains of houses, wells, and even human burials, all preserved beneath the Mediterranean waters. The massive stone structure suggested that the people who lived there were capable of organized labor on a large scale, moving and arranging tens of thousands of tons of rock for purposes we don't yet understand. The paper was published, received some academic attention, and then largely disappeared from public discussion. The stone structure remains on the seabed, occasionally visited by researchers but never comprehensively excavated or analyzed. In 2013, divers exploring waters off the coast of Sicily discovered another anomalous object. At a depth of about 130 feet on the Pantelleria Vecchia bank, they found a stone monolith approximately 40 feet long and weighing an estimated 15 tons. The stone featured a large hole drilled completely through it, a hole that appeared too regular and precise to be natural. Dr. Emanuele Lodolo, a geologist at Italy's National Institute of Oceanography and Experimental Geophysics, studied the monolith and published his findings in the Journal of Archaeological Science. His analysis concluded that the stone showed evidence of human modification. The hole, he argued, had been deliberately drilled. The monolith had been cut and transported from a source location, then placed where it was found. The Pantelleria Vecchia bank would have been dry land approximately 9,500 years ago, when sea levels were lower during the final stages of the last ice age. If Lodolo's analysis is correct, the monolith represents evidence of a civilization capable of sophisticated stoneworking at a time when the Mediterranean region was supposedly populated by simple hunter-gatherer societies. Lodolo's paper generated interest in archaeological circles and some media coverage. Then, as with so many of these discoveries, attention faded. No comprehensive expedition has been organized to search the area for additional structures. No archaeological survey has been conducted to place the monolith in broader context. A potentially history-changing artifact lies on the seabed, and the scientific world has largely moved on. You're beginning to see the pattern now. Bimini in the Bahamas, Yonaguni in Japan, the Gulf of Khambhat in India, the coast of Cuba, Atlit Yam in Israel, the Pantelleria Vecchia bank near Sicily, 6 different locations across 3 oceans, 6 discoveries of structures that appear to challenge conventional explanations, 6 cases where initial interest gave way to silence, where obvious follow-up research never materialized, where questions that could be answered remained deliberately unasked. But these visible structures may be just the beginning. In recent years, advances in satellite technology have allowed researchers to peer beneath the ocean surface in unprecedented ways. Satellite altimetry measures tiny variations in sea surface height, caused by the gravitational pull of underwater features. By analyzing these variations, scientists can infer the topography of the ocean floor even in areas that have never been directly surveyed. In 2014, researchers at Scripps Institution of Oceanography used satellite data to create the most detailed map of the global ocean floor ever produced. Their work, published in the journal Science, revealed thousands of previously unknown seamounts and underwater features. It showed the true extent of mid-ocean ridges and deep-sea trenches. It transformed our understanding of ocean floor topography. The map was a major scientific achievement, but it also highlighted how much remains unknown. Even with satellite technology, we've only scratched the surface. High-resolution sonar mapping, the kind that can reveal small-scale features like potential archaeological structures, has been conducted on less than a quarter of the ocean floor. The rest remains effectively invisible. Within this vast unexplored territory, anomalies occasionally surface. In 2009, an aeronautical engineer named Bernie Bamford was exploring the ocean floor using Google Earth when he noticed something unusual. Off the coast of Morocco, at a depth of over 10,000 feet, the seafloor imagery showed what appeared to be a grid of intersecting lines. The pattern covered an area roughly the size of Wales, with lines that seemed too straight and too regularly spaced to be natural. The discovery made international news. Speculation ranged from the remains of Atlantis to evidence of alien contact. Google quickly responded, explaining that the lines were sonar artifacts, tracks left by the ships that had surveyed that portion of the ocean floor. The parallel lines, they said, represented the paths of survey vessels, while the perpendicular lines were processing artifacts from combining different data sets. This explanation satisfied most observers, and the story faded from attention, but some researchers noted inconsistencies. The spacing and orientation of the lines didn't perfectly match standard survey patterns. The area in question had not been subject to the intensive survey activity that would produce such prominent tracks. Questions remained. In subsequent updates to Google Earth, the imagery of that area was changed. The grid pattern is no longer visible. Whether this was because better data replaced the artifacts, or because the controversial imagery was simply removed, is unclear. The pattern of discovery and disappearance continues. What makes all of these cases so frustrating is not that definitive answers don't exist. It's that definitive answers are attainable. The technology to thoroughly investigate these sites exists. Remotely operated vehicles can reach any depth in the ocean. High-resolution cameras can document structures in detail. Modern dating techniques can establish when organic materials were deposited. Side-scan sonar can map large areas quickly and accurately. The tools exist. What's missing is the will to use them. Consider how different the situation is for land-based archaeology. When potentially significant sites are discovered on land, they are typically protected, studied, and eventually explained. Controversy may persist for years, but eventually evidence accumulates and consensus forms. The scientific process, however slowly, moves toward answers. In the ocean, the process seems to stop before it properly begins. Discoveries are made, initial investigations are conducted, questions are raised, and then nothing. The sites sit unstudied, the questions unanswered, the evidence neither confirmed nor refuted. This cannot be explained by lack of interest. The public is fascinated by mysteries of the deep. Every documentary about underwater anomalies draws large audiences. Every news story about potential lost cities generates clicks and shares. It cannot be explained by lack of capability. We have submarines that can reach any depth. We have robots that can operate in total darkness under crushing pressure. We have instruments that can detect objects buried beneath layers of sediment. It cannot be fully explained by lack of funding. Billions of dollars flow into marine research every year. Private wealth funds expeditions to the Titanic and other deep-sea sites. Crowdfunding campaigns raise millions for projects far less compelling than investigating potential evidence of lost civilizations. Something else is going on. Something that prevents these obvious research opportunities from being pursued. Something that ensures the questions remain unanswered. During the Cold War, both the United States and Soviet Union deployed vast networks of underwater listening devices to track enemy submarines. These hydrophone arrays covered much of the world's oceans, monitoring sounds from the surface to the deepest trenches. The arrays picked up more than just submarines. Soviet submarine crews during the 1970s and 1980s reported encountering unexplained underwater sounds they called Quakers, named for the Quaker religious movement because the sounds resembled a kind of underwater prayer or communication. The sounds seemed to track Soviet submarines, following them for extended periods before disappearing. Soviet naval intelligence spent years investigating the phenomenon without reaching a definitive explanation. Proposed explanations range from previously unknown marine animals to secret American technology to acoustic phenomena caused by underwater geological activity. The Soviet military eventually concluded that the sounds were probably produced by male orca whales, though this explanation has never been definitively confirmed and doesn't account for all the reported characteristics of the sounds. What's significant is that the Quaker phenomenon was kept classified for decades. Soviet submarine crews were instructed not to discuss their experiences. Official investigations were conducted in secret. Only after the fall of the Soviet Union did details begin to emerge, and even now, the full scope of the phenomenon remains unclear. If the Soviets were classifying mysterious underwater sounds during the Cold War, what might other navies be keeping secret today? NOAA's hydrophone arrays have detected numerous unexplained sounds over the years. The Bloop in 1997. The Slow Down, recorded the same year, a sound that gradually decreased in frequency over about 7 minutes. Julia, also from 1997, which sounds eerily like a human voice or whale song, but matches no known species. The Upsweep, first detected in 1991 and still recorded seasonally, a sound that rises in frequency and seems to be biological, though its source has never been identified. These sounds have been publicly documented and discussed by NOAA scientists. Official explanations have been proposed for most of them, typically involving ice, geological activity, or known marine animals, but the explanations are often tentative, and alternative interpretations persist. The ocean is producing sounds we cannot fully explain, generated by sources we have not identified. This is publicly acknowledged by the scientific agencies responsible for monitoring the seas. What else are they detecting that they haven't publicly acknowledged? What sounds are being picked up by military arrays that remain classified? What might be moving through the deep ocean, producing signals that governments have decided the public shouldn't know about? These questions lead us to uncomfortable territory. If there are structures on the ocean floor that shouldn't exist, and sounds in the deep water that we cannot explain, then we're faced with possibilities that challenge our understanding of the world. The most conservative possibility is that we've simply underestimated the capabilities of prehistoric human civilizations. Perhaps communities during the last ice age were more sophisticated than we realized, building monuments and settlements that were later submerged when the glaciers melted. This would require revising our timeline of human development, but wouldn't require abandoning mainstream science altogether. A more radical possibility is that we've missed entire chapters of human history. Perhaps advanced civilizations rose and fell before the end of the Ice Age, leaving only scattered traces beneath the waves. The idea isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. Modern human beings have existed for roughly 300,000 years. Civilization as we know it is less than 10,000 years old. What happened during those other 290,000 years? Did humans simply sit around waiting to invent agriculture, or did cycles of development occur that we've simply lost track of? The most radical possibility, one that mainstream science firmly rejects, but that persistent anomalies keep suggesting, is that not all of what we're finding was made by humans. The structures at extreme depths in Cuba, the strange sounds from the deep, the objects that seem to interfere with electronic equipment. Could there be something else down there, something that preceded us, or came from somewhere else entirely? Most scientists would dismiss this final possibility as fantasy, but most scientists have also never seriously investigated the anomalies that suggest it. As we close this chapter, let's be clear about what we've established. The ocean floor contains structures that appear artificial, but remain unexplained. Some of these structures sit at depths corresponding to Ice Age coastlines, suggesting they may have been built by prehistoric human civilizations. Others sit at depths that pose more fundamental challenges to our understanding of history and geology. When these structures are discovered, investigations are begun and then abandoned. Funding dries up, permits become unavailable, researchers move on to other projects. The scientific establishment treats these sites as curiosities rather than priorities, despite their potential to reshape our understanding of human history. Meanwhile, unexplained sounds continue to emanate from the deep. Some have been documented by civilian agencies and publicly discussed. Others, detected by military systems, remain classified. The ocean is speaking, but we're not being told everything it's saying. Are these structures natural formations misidentified by wishful thinking? Are the sounds simply ice and animals, and geological processes we don't fully understand? Perhaps. But the consistent pattern of avoidance, the systematic failure to investigate, the wall of silence that descends after each discovery, suggests that something more is happening. Someone knows more than they're telling. Someone has decided that these questions shouldn't be answered, or at least not answered publicly. In the next chapter, we'll examine the expeditions that tried to uncover the truth, the ships that went looking for answers and found more than they bargained for, the submarines that descended into the abyss and encountered things that remain classified, the researchers who pushed too hard and found their careers suddenly redirected. The ocean keeps its secrets, but secrets have a way of surfacing when enough people start asking the right questions, and more people are asking every day. On August 24, 1964, the United States Navy research vessel USS Eltanin was conducting routine oceanographic surveys in the South Pacific, approximately 1,000 miles west of Cape Horn. The ship was part of an ongoing scientific program studying the Antarctic region, collecting data on water temperatures, currents, and seafloor topography. It was unglamorous work, the kind of steady scientific observation that rarely makes headlines. That day, the Eltanin's underwater camera captured something that would generate controversy for decades. At a depth of approximately 13,500 feet, the camera photographed an object standing upright on the ocean floor. The object appeared to be a pole or antenna, roughly 2 to 4 feet tall, with a series of crossbars or nodules arranged at regular intervals along its length. It looked unmistakably like a technological artifact, an antenna, a marker, something that had been deliberately placed on the seabed. The photograph was included in the Eltanin's scientific reports and eventually made its way into public circulation. It became known as the Eltanin antenna, and it sparked immediate debate about what the camera had captured. The object sat at a depth no human technology of the 1960s could reach for extended operations. The deepest diving submarines of that era couldn't approach 13,500 feet. No anchors, no drilling equipment, no scientific instruments could have been placed there and left standing upright. If the object was artificial, it hadn't been put there by any known human expedition. The Navy's official position was that the object was biological. They suggested it was a type of sponge, called Cladorhiza concrescens, a carnivorous deep-sea organism that grows in a branching pattern that can appear antenna-like. Marine biologists confirm that such sponges exist and can grow in patterns resembling the photographed object. Case closed. Natural explanation. Nothing to see here. This explanation has been repeated in the decades since, and it may well be correct. Cladorhiza species do exist and do grow in patterns that could resemble the object in the photograph. The deep sea is full of organisms that look artificial to eyes, accustomed to the surface world, but the explanation has never been definitively confirmed. No expedition has returned to the exact coordinates to photograph the object again with modern high-resolution cameras. No samples have been collected to verify that the object is indeed a sponge. The original photograph remains the only evidence, and it's ambiguous enough to support multiple interpretations. What's more interesting than the object itself is what happened afterward. In the years following the Eltanin photograph, the Navy significantly expanded its deep-sea research activities in the southern Pacific and Antarctic waters. Additional vessels were deployed. New monitoring equipment was installed. The scope of operations grew well beyond what the original scientific mission would have required. Officially, this expansion was driven by Cold War priorities. The Navy needed to understand the ocean environment to track Soviet submarines and protect American vessels. The increased activity had nothing to do with what the Eltanin's camera had captured. Perhaps that's entirely true. The Cold War certainly drove massive investment in oceanographic research, but the timing raises questions. A strange object is photographed on the deep sea floor. The Navy dismisses it as a sponge, and then the Navy dramatically expands its presence in that exact region of the ocean. If the object was just a sponge, why the sudden, intensified interest? This pattern of discovery, followed by expanded but secretive military activity, appears repeatedly in the history of ocean exploration. Let's talk about the relationship between scientific discovery and military secrecy. In 1977, scientists made one of the most significant discoveries in the history of marine biology. Near the Galapagos Islands, at a depth of approximately 8,000 feet, researchers aboard the submersible Alvin discovered hydrothermal vents, underwater hot springs where superheated water from the Earth's interior pours into the ocean. The vents were surrounded by thriving ecosystems unlike anything previously known to science. Giant tube worms, some over 6 feet long, massive clams, ghostly white crabs, all living in complete darkness, sustained not by sunlight but by chemical energy from the Earth itself. It was a new type of life, based on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. The discovery revolutionized our understanding of where and how life could exist. The scientific findings were published and celebrated. The researchers involved became famous in their fields. The hydrothermal vent discovery was a triumph of ocean exploration, proof of what we could learn by venturing into the deep. But there's an aspect of deep-sea research that the public rarely considers. Almost all of it depends on military funding and military infrastructure. Dr. Robert Ballard, one of the most famous oceanographers in history, has been unusually candid about this relationship. In interviews and in his autobiography, Ballard has explained that much of his deep-sea work was funded by the U.S. Navy, and that the Navy had priorities that didn't always align with pure science. Ballard's most famous discovery, the wreck of the Titanic in 1985, was itself intertwined with classified military operations. In 2008, Ballard publicly revealed that his Titanic expedition was partially a cover story. The Navy had approached him with a proposition. They would fund his search for the Titanic if he first completed a secret mission, investigating the wrecks of 2 nuclear submarines, the USS Thresher and USS Scorpion. The Thresher sank in April 1963 during deep diving tests east of Cape Cod, killing all 129 men aboard. It was the first nuclear submarine ever lost. The official investigation concluded that a piping failure led to flooding, which caused the reactor to shut down, leaving the submarine unable to surface. The Scorpion sank in May 1968 while returning from a deployment in the Mediterranean, killing all 99 crew members. The submarine was found on the seafloor at a depth of over 10,000 feet, broken into sections. The official cause has never been definitively established. Theories range from torpedo malfunction to hydrogen explosion to catastrophic structural failure. Some researchers have suggested Soviet involvement, though this has never been proven. Ballard examined both wrecks as part of his Navy-funded mission. What he found confirmed that both submarines had imploded as they sank, crushed by water pressure, but the full details of his investigation remain partially classified. The Navy wanted to understand what happened to their submarines. They also wanted to ensure that sensitive technology aboard the vessels hadn't been compromised. The Titanic search was real. Ballard genuinely wanted to find the famous shipwreck, but it was also a convenient public explanation for the time and resources he was spending in the deep Atlantic on classified Navy business. This arrangement reveals something important about how deep-sea exploration actually works. The scientists get access to equipment, vessels, and funding they couldn't otherwise afford. The military gets to direct where that equipment goes and control what information becomes public. Sometimes these interests align perfectly, sometimes they don't. When they don't align, the science tends to stay secret. Consider what this means. The most capable deep-sea exploration assets in the world belong to military organizations. Nuclear submarines can operate at depths, and for durations that civilian research vessels cannot match. Military sonar systems are far more sophisticated than civilian equivalents. Classified underwater monitoring networks cover vast stretches of the ocean floor. If the military finds something unusual in the deep ocean, they're under no obligation to tell anyone. National security classifications can keep discoveries secret indefinitely. Scientists working on military contracts sign non-disclosure agreements. The public only learns what the military chooses to reveal. What has the military found that it hasn't chosen to reveal? We got a partial answer to this question in 2017 when the New York Times revealed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. This Pentagon program, funded with $22 million in black budget money, had been investigating reports of unidentified aerial phenomena since 2007. The story focused on aerial encounters, particularly incidents involving Navy pilots who had observed objects performing maneuvers that seemed to defy known physics. But buried within the reporting was a detail that received less attention. Many of these encounters had occurred over water, and some of the phenomena being investigated weren't just in the air. In 2020, the Pentagon officially released 3 videos showing unidentified objects encountered by Navy pilots. The most famous of these, known as the Tic Tac video, was recorded during an incident on November 14, 2004, off the coast of San Diego. Commander David Fravor, the pilot who had the closest encounter with the object that day, has described the incident in detail in numerous interviews. What he saw began not in the air, but in the water. Fravor was flying an F/A-18 Super Hornet when he was directed to investigate an unknown contact. As he approached the coordinates, he observed something unusual on the ocean surface. The water was churning and frothing, as if something large was just beneath it. Fravor estimated the disturbance covered an area roughly the size of a Boeing 737. Hovering above this disturbance was a white oblong object approximately 40 feet long. It had no visible wings, no exhaust plume, no means of propulsion that Fravor could identify. It moved erratically like a ping-pong ball, darting in different directions. When Fravor descended to investigate, the object rose to meet him. He attempted to intercept it, spiraling down toward the ocean surface. The object mirrored his movements briefly, then accelerated away at a speed Fravor described as beyond anything he had ever seen. It vanished in seconds. When Fravor returned to the area, both the aerial object and the underwater disturbance were gone. The Navy has acknowledged that this incident occurred, and that the object remains unidentified. What they have not addressed is what was in the water, the churning surface, the disturbance that drew the aerial object's attention. Fravor has stated publicly that he believes something was beneath the surface, something the Tic Tac was either observing or interacting with. This wasn't the only naval encounter with underwater anomalies. In 2019, the USS Omaha, a littoral combat ship, recorded video of a spherical object flying over the ocean before descending into the water and disappearing. The video, leaked in 2021 and later confirmed as authentic by the Pentagon, shows the object entering the water with no apparent damage or deceleration. A submarine was reportedly dispatched to search for the object but found nothing. Where did it go? In July 2023, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in history, Congress held public hearings specifically focused on unidentified anomalous phenomena. Among the witnesses was David Grusch, a former intelligence officer who had worked on the Pentagon's UAP task force. Grusch made explosive claims about the U.S. government's knowledge of non-human intelligence, but one aspect of his testimony relates directly to our investigation. Grusch stated that recoveries of anomalous objects had occurred in various environments, and he specifically mentioned underwater retrievals. Under questioning, Grusch declined to provide specific details about these underwater operations, citing classification restrictions, but he confirmed that the ocean is among the environments where the government has recovered objects of unknown origin. This testimony has not been verified. Grusch's claims remain controversial, and he has faced both support and criticism from various quarters, but his statements were made under oath, before Congress, with the understanding that lying to Congress is a federal crime. Either Grusch is telling the truth about underwater retrievals, or he committed perjury in front of the world's cameras. Neither possibility is comfortable. The 2023 hearings also revealed that the Pentagon has been operating a formal office to investigate unidentified anomalous phenomena. This office, currently called the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is specifically tasked with investigating reports from all environments, including underwater. For the first time, the U.S. government has officially acknowledged that unidentified phenomena in the ocean are a subject of serious investigation. This is a significant shift from decades of denial and ridicule, but acknowledgement isn't the same as disclosure. The fact that the government is investigating underwater anomalies doesn't mean they're sharing what they found. Let's go back in time to examine what military vessels have encountered in the ocean over the decades. During the Cold War, both superpowers operated submarines in every ocean on Earth. These vessels spent months at a time submerged, patrolling shipping lanes, monitoring enemy activity, and gathering intelligence. The crews saw things that no surface sailor would ever witness, and much of what they saw remains classified, but some information has emerged. Soviet submarine crews during the 1970s and 1980s reported encountering unexplained underwater sounds they called kavakari, or Quakers, named because the sounds resembled a rhythmic croaking, or the vocal patterns of Quaker religious meetings. These sounds would appear suddenly, seem to track Soviet submarines for extended periods, and then disappear just as suddenly. The Quaker phenomenon was taken seriously by Soviet naval intelligence. They compiled databases of encounters, analyzed acoustic signatures, and attempted to identify the source. Proposed explanations included American secret technology, unknown marine animals, and underwater acoustic phenomena. After the fall of the Soviet Union, some information about the Quaker investigations was declassified. Russian naval officers who had participated in the investigation shared their experiences. The official conclusion was inconclusive. The sounds might have been produced by male orca whales, whose calls can resemble the Quaker signature, but this explanation didn't account for all the reported characteristics, particularly the apparent tracking behavior. To this day, the Quaker phenomenon has never been definitively explained. Soviet sailors encountered something in the depths that they couldn't identify, reported it faithfully, and watched as their superiors failed to find answers. American submarine crews have been less forthcoming, but similar accounts have emerged over the years. In 1963, during naval exercises near Puerto Rico, multiple U.S. Navy vessels reportedly tracked an underwater object that was moving at speeds impossible for any known submarine. The object was tracked over several days as it maneuvered around the exercise area, diving to depths that no submarine could reach and then returning to shallower water. This incident is described in various accounts from the period, though official documentation remains classified. The waters around Puerto Rico, particularly near the Atlantic Undersea Test and Evaluation Center on Andros Island in the Bahamas, have been associated with numerous reports of anomalous underwater phenomena over the decades. AUTEC, as the facility is known, is one of the Navy's most secretive installations. Located in the deep waters of the tongue of the ocean, a deep underwater canyon, AUTEC is used for testing submarines, underwater weapon systems, and classified technologies. The facility's activities are not disclosed to the public. AUTEC has been the subject of persistent rumors about underwater anomalies. Former personnel have anonymously described encounters with objects that appeared on sonar but couldn't be identified. Some researchers have noted the facility's location in an area associated with Bermuda Triangle legends, though these connections remain speculative. What is certain is that AUTEC operates in some of the deepest accessible waters near the U.S. mainland, conducts classified operations that are never disclosed, and has been associated with anomalous reports for decades. What the Navy has learned from operating there remains unknown. The pattern of military secrecy extends beyond the United States. In 2017, Argentine submarine ARA San Juan disappeared in the South Atlantic with 44 crew members aboard. The submarine was on a routine patrol when it reported an electrical malfunction and then went silent. Despite an extensive international search, the wreck wasn't located until a year later, at a depth of nearly 3,000 feet. The official investigation concluded that the submarine suffered a battery malfunction that led to an explosion and rapid sinking, but some aspects of the incident raised questions. In the days before the San Juan's disappearance, the submarine had reported detecting what the crew described as a hydroacoustic anomaly. The nature of this anomaly was never fully explained. When the wreck was finally located, some observers noted that the damage pattern was unusual, though official reports attributed it to the implosion and impact with the seafloor. The San Juan incident may have a completely conventional explanation. Submarine accidents are tragically common throughout naval history, but the unexplained anomaly reported by the crew, combined with the long delay in locating the wreck, despite intensive searching, has led some researchers to ask whether there was more to the incident than the official story suggests. Similar questions surround other submarine losses: the USS Thresher, the USS Scorpion, the Russian submarine Kursk, which sank in 2000 under controversial circumstances. In each case, official explanations have been provided. In each case, questions persist. Submarines operate in an environment that is inherently hidden from public view. When something goes wrong, when something unusual is encountered, the only witnesses are the crew members, and if those crew members don't survive, their observations die with them. How many encounters have been lost along with the crews who experienced them? Let's turn to what happens when civilian researchers stumble onto things they're not supposed to find. The scientific community operates on reputation and relationships. Funding depends on being taken seriously by peers and granting agencies. Career advancement depends on publishing in respected journals and maintaining professional standing. Scientists who want to succeed learn which questions are safe to ask and which will mark them as unreliable. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist at Boston University, learned this lesson firsthand. In the early 1990s, Schoch examined the Great Sphinx of Egypt and concluded that its erosion patterns indicated it was much older than mainstream Egyptology accepted. His findings suggested the Sphinx could date to 5000 BCE or earlier, thousands of years before conventional dating. Schoch's geological credentials were impeccable. His methodology was sound, but his conclusions challenged established narratives, and the response from the Egyptological community was hostile. He was dismissed as a crank, accused of aiding pseudoscience, and found himself professionally marginalized despite his legitimate academic standing. In subsequent years, Schoch investigated the Yonaguni monument in Japan. He dove on the structure in 1997 and concluded that while it might contain some human modifications, it was primarily a natural geological formation. This conclusion was more conservative than the claims of researchers like Dr. Masaki Kimura, who believe the monument is largely man-made, but even Schoch's moderate position generated controversy. The fact that he took the monument seriously enough to investigate it personally was enough to raise eyebrows among colleagues who felt that the entire subject was beneath scientific attention. Dr. Masaki Kimura himself has experienced decades of professional isolation because of his Yonaguni research. In interviews and papers, Kimura has described how colleagues who respect his other geological work avoid discussing his underwater research. Invitations to collaborate on unrelated projects have decreased. He has been gradually pushed to the margins of his field because he refuses to abandon a line of inquiry that makes his peers uncomfortable. Kimura hasn't been silenced through dramatic intervention. No one confiscated his data or threatened his career directly. Instead, he has been made to understand that certain topics are not welcome in polite scientific company. The pressure is social rather than coercive, but it is effective. This soft suppression is more powerful than any conspiracy of silence could be. It doesn't require coordination or secret meetings. It emerges naturally from the social dynamics of professional communities. Researchers see what happens to colleagues who pursue unfashionable topics. They draw conclusions about what questions are safe to ask. They self-censor. The result is that legitimate anomalies go uninvestigated. Sites that deserve serious research are ignored. Questions that could be answered remain unasked. In 2012, filmmaker James Cameron piloted the Deep-Sea Challenger submersible to the bottom of the Challenger Deep, becoming only the third person in history to reach the deepest point in the ocean. Cameron spent several hours on the seafloor, collecting samples and filming his surroundings. In interviews after the dive, Cameron described the experience as both awe-inspiring and eerie. He spoke of the profound isolation, the crushing darkness, the sense of being somewhere that humans were never meant to go. He collected samples and footage that contributed to scientific research, but Cameron also acknowledged that his dive barely scratched the surface of what the deep ocean contains. He spent hours at one point on a seafloor that spans millions of square miles. He saw what his lights illuminated and nothing more. The rest remained in darkness. When asked whether he saw anything unexpected or unexplained during his dive, Cameron was circumspect. He described the environment as alien, as strange as any science fiction setting. He noted that the deep sea contains creatures and formations that would seem impossible if we didn't have proof of their existence. What he didn't say is sometimes as interesting as what he did say. Cameron is a filmmaker known for science fiction epics about alien contact and underwater mysteries. If anyone would be inclined to dramatize an unexpected discovery, it would be him. His restraint suggests either that he saw nothing truly anomalous, or that some experiences are best kept private. We can only speculate. What can we say with certainty about expeditions and secrecy? We can say that the deep ocean has been explored primarily by military organizations with classified agendas. We can say that scientific research in the deep sea typically depends on military funding and military infrastructure, creating relationships that allow information to be controlled. We can say that the U.S. government has officially acknowledged investigating unidentified phenomena in the ocean. We can say that congressional testimony under oath has alleged underwater retrievals of objects of unknown origin. We can say that military personnel from multiple nations have reported encounters with underwater phenomena that they could not explain. We can say that researchers who pursue anomalous subjects face professional marginalization, while legitimate mysteries remain uninvestigated for lack of funding and institutional support. We can say that the ocean remains 95% unexplored, not because we lack the technology to explore it, but because the exploration that does occur is controlled by institutions with reasons for secrecy. None of this proves that there's something extraordinary in the deep ocean, but it does prove that we don't know what's down there, and that powerful institutions seem content to keep it that way. In the final chapter, we'll examine who benefits from this secrecy. We'll look at evidence that the era of concealment may be ending. We'll consider what disclosure might mean for humanity, and we'll ask the question that underlies everything we've discussed. What are they hiding, and why? We have traveled a long way together through these pages. We've examined how the ocean remains 95% unexplored, not because we lack technology, but because exploration is systematically underfunded and redirected. We've documented structures on the seafloor that mainstream science cannot explain and refuses to investigate. We've traced the pattern of expeditions that find something unusual and then go silent, of researchers whose careers pivot away from uncomfortable questions, of military organizations that know more than they reveal. Now we must ask the questions that matter most. Who benefits from keeping the ocean's secrets hidden? Why has this secrecy persisted for so long? And what signs suggest that the wall of silence may finally be cracking? Let's begin with the most concrete explanation. The ocean floor contains resources worth trillions of dollars. This isn't speculation, it's documented fact. The seabed is covered with polymetallic nodules containing manganese, nickel, copper, cobalt, and rare earth elements. These materials are essential for modern technology. Every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every wind turbine, every advanced weapon system depends on them. The International Seabed Authority has estimated that the Clarion-Clipperton Zone alone, a region of the Pacific between Hawaii and Mexico, contains more manganese, nickel, and cobalt than all known land-based reserves combined. In 2021, the ISA reported that it had issued 31 exploration contracts covering over 1.5 million square kilometers of seafloor. The contracted parties include state-owned enterprises from China, Russia, South Korea, and several European nations, as well as small island nations acting as sponsors for private corporations. A new scramble for resources is underway, and most people don't even know it's happening. The Metals Company, a Canadian firm, has been at the forefront of pushing for commercial deep-sea mining. In 2022, they announced plans to begin extraction in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone as early as 2024. Environmental groups protested. Scientists warned of ecological damage to poorly understood ecosystems, but the economic pressures are immense. Consider this. The World Bank estimates that production of minerals like cobalt and lithium will need to increase by nearly 500% by 2050 to meet the demand from clean energy technologies. Land-based mining cannot meet this demand. The deep sea is the only alternative. Whoever controls access to these resources controls the future of the global economy. This explains much of the pattern we've observed. Exploration is underfunded publicly, while military organizations map the seafloor in secret. Discoveries are classified. Access is restricted through international treaties that seem designed to limit who can participate. When deep-sea mining begins in earnest, certain players will already know where the richest deposits are located. They've been mapping for decades. Everyone else will be starting from scratch. But resource competition doesn't explain everything. In November 2022, China's Fendoja submersible completed a series of dives to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, reaching depths exceeding 35,000 feet. The Chinese state media celebrated the achievement as a demonstration of technological prowess. What they revealed about what Fendoja found was notably limited. Chinese scientists published papers about microbial life in the trench sediments and the unique geological formations observed during the dives, standard scientific findings. But footage from the dives, which reportedly amounted to hundreds of hours, has not been released to the international scientific community. Data sharing agreements that typically accompany such expeditions have not been honored. What did Fendoja see that China isn't sharing? We may never know, but China's sudden acceleration of deep-sea capabilities is notable. In 2020, Fendoja became the second crewed vessel ever to reach the deepest point of the Challenger Deep, after James Cameron's 2012 solo dive. Since then, China has announced plans for a permanent deep-sea research station and has invested billions in underwater technology. The race to the bottom is real, and the competitors aren't sharing what they find. Russia, despite its economic constraints, has maintained its deep-sea capabilities. In 2007, a Russian expedition planted a titanium flag on the seabed beneath the North Pole at a depth of over 14,000 feet. The gesture was symbolic, but the message was clear. Russia considers the Arctic seabed its territory, regardless of international law. Since then, Russia has deployed deep-sea vehicles across the Arctic, mapping terrain that climate change is making increasingly accessible. In 2019, Russian state media reported that these expeditions had made discoveries of strategic significance that could not be disclosed for national security reasons. Strategic significance, national security, the language of secrets. The United States, through the Navy and classified programs, has been operating in the deep ocean longer than any other nation. What they know remains hidden behind security classifications that may never be lifted, but occasionally the wall cracks. Let's examine the most significant cracks in recent years. In December 2017, the New York Times published a story that changed the conversation about unexplained phenomena permanently. The article revealed the existence of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a Pentagon initiative that had been secretly investigating reports of unidentified objects since 2007. The program had been funded with $22 million in black budget money, hidden from public oversight. The story focused on aerial encounters, but it included details that pointed toward the ocean. Luis Elizondo, the intelligence officer who had run the program, spoke of phenomena that operated across multiple domains: air, space, and water. In 2019, Navy pilots began speaking publicly about their encounters. Lieutenant Ryan Graves described objects that his squadron tracked almost daily off the coast of Virginia between 2014 and 2015. The objects had no visible means of propulsion. They could remain stationary in hurricane-force winds. They could accelerate instantaneously. Commander David Fravor described his 2004 encounter with the Tic Tac object, hovering over churning water that suggested something massive was just beneath the surface. In April 2020, the Pentagon took an unprecedented step. It officially released 3 videos showing unidentified objects encountered by Navy pilots. For the first time in history, the U.S. government confirmed that its military personnel were encountering things they could not explain. The videos were just the beginning. In June 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena. The report examined 144 incidents reported by military personnel between 2004 and 2021. Of these, only one could be definitively explained. The rest remain mysteries. The report acknowledged that some objects appeared to demonstrate advanced technology, unusual flight characteristics, signatures that didn't match any known aircraft, movement patterns that defied conventional physics. Crucially, the report did not rule out the possibility that some objects were non-human in origin. The authors wrote that they would need additional data to determine whether the objects represented breakthrough technology from a foreign adversary or something else entirely. Something else entirely. Those 3 words carried enormous weight. In December 2022, Congress passed the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023. Buried within this massive legislation was something remarkable. Congress mandated the creation of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, with explicit authority to investigate unidentified phenomena not just in the air, but in space and underwater. For the first time, U.S. law officially recognized that the ocean contained anomalies worthy of government investigation. Then came July 2023. On July 26th, the House Oversight Committee held a public hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena. 3 witnesses testified under oath. David Fravor recounted his Tic Tac encounter. Ryan Graves described the near-daily sightings his squadron had experienced, and David Grusch, a former intelligence officer who had worked on the Pentagon's UAP task force, made claims that would have been unthinkable in any previous era. Grusch testified that the United States government has been running a secret program to recover and reverse engineer craft of non-human origin. He stated that he had been denied access to this program and had faced retaliation for attempting to bring information to Congress. He alleged that recoveries had occurred across multiple environments. Under questioning from Representative Tim Burchett, Grusch was asked directly about underwater operations. He confirmed that ocean environments were among those where recoveries had allegedly taken place. He could not provide specific details due to classification restrictions, but his meaning was clear. The U.S. government, according to Grusch, has retrieved objects from the ocean that are not human in origin. This testimony was given under oath before Congress, with the understanding that lying to Congress is a federal crime punishable by imprisonment. Grusch either told the truth as he understands it, or he committed perjury on live television. The hearing also revealed something significant about congressional knowledge. Representatives from both parties expressed frustration that they had been denied access to information by the Pentagon and intelligence agencies. Elected officials responsible for oversight were being kept in the dark by unelected bureaucrats running classified programs. This suggests that whatever secrets exist about the ocean and its anomalies, they are held very closely. Even members of Congress with security clearances don't have full access. What is being hidden, and why? In September 2023, something unusual happened in the world of ocean exploration. Ocean Infinity, a private company specializing in deep-sea search and survey operations, announced an ambitious initiative. They plan to map the entire ocean floor at high resolution within the next decade. The project would use a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, operating continuously across all ocean basins, collecting data at a scale never before attempted. Ocean Infinity had previously made headlines for locating the wreck of the ARA San Juan, the Argentine submarine that disappeared in 2017. They had also been contracted to search for Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, which vanished over the Indian Ocean in 2014. The company had proven it could find objects at extreme depths that others had failed to locate. Their announcement raised immediate questions. What would they find? What would they reveal? And what would happen when a private company began mapping territory that governments had kept secret for decades? As of early 2024, the initiative is underway. Autonomous vehicles are collecting data across portions of the Atlantic and Pacific. What they found has not been fully disclosed, but the very existence of such a project represents a shift. Technology is democratizing, costs are falling. What once required naval vessels and government budgets can now be accomplished by private companies with commercial equipment. The secrets of the deep may not remain secret much longer. In February 2024, Japan announced that its research submersible Shinkai 6500 had discovered unusual formations on the seafloor approximately 400 miles south of Tokyo. The formations appeared to be geometric, with characteristics that researchers described as anomalous in initial reports. Subsequent Japanese government statements have been limited. The site has been designated for further study, but access has been restricted pending security review. Scientists who participated in the initial discovery have not been available for interview. The pattern continues. What are we to make of all this? Let me lay out what we can say with confidence. The ocean contains structures that mainstream science has not explained and has largely refused to investigate. Bimini, Yonaguni, the Gulf of Khambhat, the formations off Cuba, the monolith near Sicily. Each represents a mystery that could be resolved with proper research. That research has not been conducted. Military organizations from multiple nations have detected objects in the ocean that they cannot identify. Soviet submariners tracked the Quakers for decades. American ships tracked impossible objects near Puerto Rico in 1963. The USS Nimitz carrier group encountered something interacting with the water in 2004. The USS Omaha recorded an object entering the ocean in 2019. These encounters span decades, involve multiple independent witnesses, and have been partially acknowledged by official sources. The U.S. government has created formal mechanisms for investigating underwater anomalies. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has explicit authority over the undersea environment. Congressional hearings have addressed the topic. Legislation has been passed. Whatever the government knows, it now acknowledges that there is something to investigate. A credible witness has testified under oath that objects of non-human origin have been recovered from the ocean. David Grusch's claims remain unverified, but he made them in circumstances that carry legal consequences for deception. Either he is telling the truth or he has committed a serious crime. Private companies are beginning to map the ocean floor at unprecedented resolution. The era when governments could control what was known about the deep sea is ending. Whatever is down there will eventually be found by someone with a camera and a desire to share what they see. The era of secrecy is ending. The question is what comes next. Consider what disclosure might look like. If the truth is that ancient human civilizations existed before the Ice Age, we will need to rewrite our history. This has happened before. When plate tectonics was proposed, geologists resisted for decades before the evidence became undeniable. When the asteroid impact theory for dinosaur extinction was introduced, it took 20 years to achieve consensus. Science adapts. So will our understanding of human history. If the truth is that intelligent non-human entities exist in the ocean, the implications are more profound. But even here, there are precedents for adaptation. In 2014, the Vatican's chief astronomer stated publicly that the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence would not contradict Catholic teaching. Other religious traditions have made similar accommodations. The discovery of other minds in the universe need not shatter human civilization. It might humble us, it might unite us, it might force us to see ourselves more clearly. What seems certain is that continued secrecy is not sustainable. The technology to explore the deep ocean is proliferating. The political will to maintain cover-ups is eroding. The witnesses are speaking. The data is accumulating. Something is going to give. We stand at a threshold. Behind us lies a century of denial, suppression, and carefully managed ignorance. Ahead lies the possibility of knowledge that could transform our understanding of ourselves and our place on this planet. The ocean covers 71% of Earth's surface. It is the largest environment we have access to, and we have deliberately chosen not to explore it. That choice was made for us by people who decided that we weren't ready to know what's down there, but choices can be unmade. Public pressure can force disclosure. Independent researchers can find what officials hide. Technology can open doors that policy tries to keep closed. The ocean has kept its secrets for longer than human civilization has existed, but secrets don't last forever. Pressure builds. Evidence accumulates. The truth finds a way to surface, and the surface is where we're waiting. In 1960, 2 men descended to the deepest point on Earth and returned safely. In 2012, a filmmaker repeated the journey. In 2020, a Chinese submersible made multiple trips to the same depth. Each dive proves that the deep ocean is not beyond our reach. The only thing keeping us from knowing what's down there is the decision not to look. That decision is changing. The hearings have happened. The offices have been created. The witnesses have spoken. The autonomous vehicles are mapping. The age of ocean secrecy is ending. What comes next depends on us, whether we demand answers or accept silence, whether we support exploration or tolerate its suppression, whether we insist on transparency or permit continued concealment. The abyss has kept its secrets long enough. It's time to see what's down there.